Hello and welcome to Men in Progress, the podcast of the United Methodist Men of Trietsch and part of the Life Plus God podcast here at Trietsch Memorial United Methodist Church in Flower Mound, Texas. I'm your host, David Casey, just one of the many men here trying to live out our faith and grow in our relationship with Jesus Christ. As this is our podcast for June, and we just celebrated Father's Day, we thought we'd take a look on how becoming a father changes us as men, and more specifically as Christian men. So to help me answer these questions, I've got three well-known fathers here from Trietsch United Methodist, Todd Patrick, Andy Juett, and Chris Robinson. Guys, welcome to Men in Progress.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks you guys for coming. So I'm advertising that you guys are all fathers, so I'm going to start at the beginning and start with you, Chris, and tell us about your family.
Well, Denise and I have been married for 39 years this year. We've got two daughters who are now 36 and 33.
You passed the first test. You know how old they are. So.
Well, they will be this summer, so I'm a little bit ahead of the game there. But, so Stephanie is our oldest, and Alyssa is our youngest. And, faith has been an important part of our family journey, and we've been very blessed to have girls that were participating in church and who have grown up to be strong in their faith and have found their own style of understanding. And I think that that's really what we're all trying to achieve as fathers and parents.
That is awesome. Well, we're going to learn more about that. So, Todd, how about yourself?
So Liz and I have been married for over 40 years. When we got married, we did not want kids. We had an agreement.
Wow.
If I wanted kids, I should find somebody else. And we did that, worked hard, played hard for 10 years or so, and then we decided we'd try, and a couple months later, Sydney was due, and she's 28 now.
Wow.
And we said, okay, we got one, we're done.
Yeah.
And God had other plans because he gave us Mackenzie 4 years later, and she's now 24.
That's wonderful. So you got two girls as well?
Two girls as well.
Wow. Okay, Mr. Juett, how about yourself?
Okay, well, Donna and I, we've been married for 36 years, and we have three children. Our oldest daughter, Carly, is 35. Our son, Jacob, is 33, and our youngest, Kristen, is 31. And we had our kids about a year after we got married. So,
wow.
So we kind of grew up with them.
No 10 years of partying like that, huh?
No. It was and they were all blessings. And Donna came from a big family, and so somehow we stopped at 3 and didn't go to 7 or 8 like some of the others in her family did.
That's incredible. Well, for myself, as you guys probably know, I've got two sons, I guess 30 and 28, and we got married. I won't say late in life, but it was pretty late in life. So it was we were well into our 30s when we got married, although we had dated for 9 years. I don't know how that played out, but so anyway, it's tell me about what it was like when the first child was born. You know, what were your feelings? I'm going to start with you, Andy, on this.
So, like I said, I was pretty young. I was 24 when our first child was born, and it was kind of a wake up call. I mean, I just thought, okay, I've got to grow up now. It's time to get a little more responsibility but
trade the Corvette.
Yeah, I wish it was a Corvette, but it was a blessing in so many ways, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
Yeah.
I've had friends that waited much later, and I'm glad we had them when we did because we were able to do a lot more with them.
Sure.
And
that's great.
Coach and do a lot of other stuff that some other people didn't get to do.
Still young enough to play.
Yeah.
That's super. Todd, about you? Do you remember?
Well, we had plenty of time to prepare.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as though we were caught off guard. We understood what we were had signed up for. Liz was still working full time. I had at that point a very stressful job, and it was definitely a lifestyle change, and for the first few years, really all you're doing is diapers and feeding and that type of thing. But then as they began to get older, there was a lot more decisions that had to be made and a lot more involvement, and that's we had live-in childcare.
Wow.
We were blessed from that perspective because Liz wanted to continue to work, so we had nannies for the first 4 years, and then overall for 10 years, and that brought its own dynamic.
Sure.
And it's like having almost like having a third daughter that was much older, but it was interesting to have the first one at 35 years old, and then have the dynamic of having a 20-something and an infant both new in the house.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, wow. It's like big sister around or something. Yeah. Super. So how about you, Mr. Robinson? What was your feelings when Stephanie was born?
I was on cloud nine.
Yeah.
I mean, I was excited about the pregnancy, the anticipation of a baby coming along, and I just remember Stephanie was born on a Sunday morning, and you would have had to scrape me off the ceiling.
Yeah.
And one of the favorite memories that I have of that day is that our pastor, Wib Christie, who was in Irving at the time, with everything he had going on to prepare for worship that morning, came to the hospital, sat with us, prayed over Denise as she went into the labor and delivery room, and it was just such a cool experience.
Wow.
It was a real blessing for us.
Yeah. I remember ours was a little different. So we had planned. We married, and then we waited almost 4 years, I guess, before Patrick was born, and it was I was working, Doris was working, she worked over here at Marcus High School, and so I get a call from her. She says, I knew she was going in the doctor just for a checkup. She says, hey, I'm at the doctor's. And I said, yeah. She's actually, I'm at the hospital. And they said, you need to get down here pretty quick. I'm going, ruh-roh. And we're like 3 or 4 weeks early at this point. And so I get on, and they said, yeah, this baby's getting big. In fact, he's so big, there's not much room in there for him. And so he's coming out today, so in a couple of hours. And it was a huge thunderstorm going on. And my theory was it's that low pressure situation caused I've dealt with a lot of calves over the years, and that's when the calves show up, is in the middle of thunderstorms and stuff. So interesting. So it was we were planning, but the actual arrival was pretty exciting, and so it was a day, obviously a day you never forget as a dad, and go through that. So I'm wondering, did you guys have any fear or trepidation? You mentioned a little bit. Now I got to be responsible, Andy. But how about you guys? Did any fear come into this? Like, oh my gosh.
Well, I did have to trade in my 280ZX for a Buick station wagon. That was a big adjustment for me. But
so resentment right away, I can tell you.
But no, I didn't really have any fear. I've never been one who is, overly stressed by anything, and I kind of take things as they go. And the pregnancy had been healthy, and the delivery was good, and so it was just figuring out, now what do we do? How do we operate with this third little person in the house? And I think that we figured that out pretty quickly once we threw all the books away.
So Todd, you mentioned you guys were a little like I was, a little later in life, and so did you have any fear? Like, wow,
yeah, I mean,
got to start a college fund, and
we'd been set in our ways. I mean, with the two of us, we did what we wanted to do, and I mentioned earlier, but I mean, she started off with kind of a frightening thing because our first was born, or first she was due early January, and Liz's water broke New Year's Eve.
Wow.
So December 31st, like quarter to midnight.
A little early.
Getting up out of bed and driving my pregnant wife and soon-to-be child in the Northern Virginia traffic with all the partiers out, and it started off with that. and things kind of got easier after that.
So was it a tax deduction that year or the following year?
It didn't happen to the next year, but that's okay. That's not why we decided to have them, so it's all good. But it was a fair amount of fear of the unknown.
Sure.
And after a few weeks of dealing with the wake-ups and the diapers and the feeding and everything, we quickly got into a routine. And then, of course, we had to live in childcare that took care of the day, and then it was on us in the night. And fortunately, we had grandparents. All 4 grandparents were still alive and engaged and active and everything, so that was good.
Support system.
Yeah, great support system.
Yeah. Well, super. So, Andy, I got a great question for you. What's been your greatest challenge as a dad?
Boy.
See, they got the easy questions. We're not going to nail you. Yeah.
Greatest challenge as a dad is basically letting them make a lot of their own decisions.
Yeah.
Letting them make mistakes so they learn.
Yep.
And instead of trying to make their decisions for them.
And that was easier on the second one, and in some cases the third one, I guess, for you. But the first one, that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It really was hard, and then you're so right about how different of a parent you are after 1, and then 2, and then 3.
Yeah.
The third one gets a pass on just about everything. Yeah. So
it doesn't have the cleanest, pacifier either. You just picked it up off the ground and hand it back to them.
Yeah.
All that good stuff. How about Chris? How about you? What do you think your greatest challenge has been as a dad?
I think that it was learning how to communicate with each of my daughters because they're such different personalities, and they would receive input much differently. They would express themselves much differently. So learning how to listen, I think, was really important for me. Learning when to shut up is, I think, important for any man, children or no children. But they don't always need advice. Sometimes they just need to be heard. And I think that it takes a little bit of time to get used to that, especially for us men who always want to fix something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Todd, I got a little bit different question for you. So it's, we're all men of faith. So being a dad, did that change your faith in any way?
It did, and we started making more intentional decisions about, where we would want to live or what school system or what church we would go to. And because we realized how important the church was in helping to raise your child.
Sure.
And we were in an odd situation. It would be like living in the Marcus School District, but going to Flower Mound or something like that. So we went to church in a different school district than where we lived. And that brought its own sense of we weren't going to get what we wanted to get, having our children grow up in the church and have the accountability of their peers from Sunday school transition over into school.
Yeah.
Because we had this vision of what our kids growing up in a church would look like. So when we moved to Texas, everything changed, and we were really more intentional. We found Trietsch. We were thrilled with Trietsch, and there's a dozen fine folks here who did a lot to help us raise our 2 girls to the women they are today.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, that's been my experience too. It's interesting. When we were dating, we went to church, but it was pretty haphazard. I would go to church with Doris at her hometown and stuff like that. She'd go to church with me in my hometown, and we'd occasionally go to church here, locally. But we were both working all the time. I can't say we went to church on a regular basis. There's something about having children. It's like, oh, we better find a church, and we better get plugged in, and because we're gonna need that church support. Raising kids. That's just kind of a thing. And we were fortunate enough that Doris worked next door to Trietsch, so she watched him build the building and said, "Wow, well, it looks like a nice church. I like the building." So, and that's how we got here. We came over. We visited several churches, but we ended up here. And but I think it is, and I think my faith has been strengthened I guess because a lot of it's just being involved in the church, but because your kids are there and you're there that much more, a lot more activities and things like that, and you just tend to gravitate to those kind of folks, and those things happen. Now this is a one. I'll start with Andy again, I guess. What's been your proudest dad moment? I asked you about the challenge. So,
gosh, my proudest dad moment is just looking at my kids now and seeing the grown-ups they've become. Mm-hmm. It's like I say, my youngest is 31. They're all great citizens, great kids. Just seeing them where they are now, and we can actually be friends now. Where growing up, my daughter asked me one time, "Dad, I want to be friends," and I said, "No, we can't be friends
because I'm in charge."
Yeah, so. And so it's been great seeing the transition from childhood to adult, and that they're responsible adults. Mm-hmm. I think that means so much to me.
Yeah, Chris, how about you? Proudest dad moment. Now you can do one for each kid if you want, or
it's much like Andy's response. Yeah. I have made it a point to tell my girls from the time they were very young on a regular basis, I love you and I'm proud of you. Yeah. And they would often ask, "What's that for?"
Yeah. Why do you keep saying that?
Yeah. And it's really to reinforce in them how much I believe that and how much I wanted them to believe that about themselves. Yeah. And I think that it's something that any father has pride in their children, right? And it doesn't mean that our children are going to be perfect. Yeah. But we are proud of who they are. I was proud of the integrity that they showed in making decisions and the things that they did, and I still am. And I still remind them that I love them and that I'm proud of them, because I don't think that that's anything that a child, no matter what age, should stop hearing from their father.
Yeah, no kidding. And then it's, you think about that, well, they graduated cum laude or whatever, but then I'm also proud of them when they've had to make tough decisions or they've made a big mistake and they've overcome that.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting because Stephanie swam in college and she had her senior banquet, and all the parents were to get up and say something about their kids. And I think I was one of the only parents who said nothing at all about swimming.
Yeah,
just said I'm proud of you despite swimming.
Yeah,
and everybody was kind of like, wow, you're kind of ruining the punch here, yeah. But it was the truth.
Sure. It goes
is
way
that
beyond
when we start to look at our kids and grade our kids on what they're accomplishing or how they're doing in school, mm-hmm. then we start to take the focus away from who they are as individuals and who they are created to be.
Sure.
And not to worry so much about what society tells them they should be, and society tries to shape them instead of allowing the love of a family shape them.
Yeah. Todd, how about you?
So I could follow both my girls through high school and college and now as adults, and they both played golf for Marcus. They were both varsity by their second half of their freshman year. And with Sydney, she was a kind-hearted one, and she was always the nurturing one that would take care of the new kids that would come onto the team, and she was recognized every year outside of her accomplishments for going to regional or whatever. She was recognized for having the Heart Award and being the compassionate one to help guide the new players along. Mackenzie was a lot more competitive, and for her she got a hole in one day when it was 37 degrees and the wind was blowing 30 miles into her face. So there's some proud dad moments there. But then on the spiritual side, Mackenzie was very spiritual and was doing Bible study, was going to the youth on the Tuesday mornings, would do her reading, she'd highlight in her Bibles, and was very, very diligent and still is. She sets the standard, from that perspective, from self-study and learning, and and to continue to do that. And then, of course, they went to college, both. They picked a major. They stayed with their major. They're now both working in that same field, which makes a parent proud, too, when you pay for all that college, particularly one of them 5 years out of state.
Yeah, know that well.
and then now they're both just great humans. I mean, Sydney's 28. She's very responsible. She purchased her own home. She's finally taken in a roommate. And Mackenzie moved to Seattle right after she graduated from A&M, right in the middle of COVID, and she stuck with it for 2 years, and now she's thriving there. So, yeah, they've given Liz and I a lot of things to be proud of, and what they've done, and how they've approached life and overcome obstacles, and they both have been very faith-based in the way they look at virtually everything.
Wow, that's wonderful to hear. So it's that you almost answered my next question, which is kind of interesting. It's as a father, do you feel pressure to being responsible for your child's faith, spiritual life, basically that type of thing? So have you felt that pressure, Andy?
I think I did when they were younger, but now that they're older and making their own decisions, we just hope we give them the foundation. Because sometimes the bird has to leave the nest, and they make those decisions on their own. So I don't feel that pressure,
right?
But I did when they were younger. And some of it was Jacob played soccer, and a lot of the club soccer had games on Sundays, and I struggled with that some.
Sure,
but we missed church several times to go to soccer tournaments, or we're out of town for soccer tournaments and things. And part of me regrets that, but he still had a foundation. That when he was here. So it is tough when they are growing up to keep them kind of on that path.
Yeah.
But then there comes a point in time, like say, you've got to let them make their decisions.
Yeah.
So.
That's true. Yeah. And I know with our guys, we always made sure they went to church, and as they got older, they were in youth group and they did other stuff like that. I think when they got to college, it was interesting. The first time we went down to see Patrick at Texas A&M, and he goes, he'd been about halfway through his freshman semester, and he says, "Well, you guys are coming down. There's a football game on Saturday, and then Sunday we'll go to church." And I said, his mother's like, "Wow, that's amazing." He's a college kid, So we go to church, with him the next morning, and she goes, "I'm just really proud, you're going to church." She goes, "Well, it's much better to go to church, because if you don't, the Corps has other things for you to do on campus at Sunday mornings." So he's I'm a churchgoer now. So it's like
found religion.
Yeah, I'm not sure that really, was that may not have been my proud moment, but at least he's a practical guy, so it's whatever. So we've talked about it in terms of the kids, but just in terms of in general, and there's all types of parenting skills out there, and we watch people, and some are wildly successful or appear to be, and some you say, wow, that's a tough one. But what's your definition of a good father? And I think you touched on something a little bit like that, kind of giving them the rein.
Yeah. To me, the definition of a good father is, number one, being there, not making all their decisions for them, letting them have enough rope so they don't hang themselves. You're there, you nurture as best you can, and you try to get them to make their own responsible decisions.
Sure. Todd, what do you think?
Well, very much what Andy said, and Chris touched on it earlier as well. I think giving them a chance to learn on their own, but also giving them guidance. And it's a scary world today, too. I mean, if you look at, whether it's financial or electronic, there's a lot of ways people are out to get somebody.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that they're very attractive young women. I always struggled trying to not nag, but make sure that they were fully informed, make sure that they understood when they were taking risks. And that's probably the hardest I had. And Liz did a lot of that as well. It's the mom. She was the mother figure, and there's always a dynamic between the fathers and the sons and the mothers and the daughters that it's different. So for me, it was some respects kind of easy, but as they got older, now I feel like I'm able to contribute more in some of those areas without preaching, without being preachy or repetitive.
Yeah, there's a whole new set of, I guess, circumstances when it's a girl. I mean, I've had 2 boys, so I've never been through that. But I know, I just think if I'm a father of girls, you got a lot to worry about being a father of girls, and just for, like you said, them being conscious of where they are, their surroundings, their circumstances, and stuff like that. Not that bad stuff doesn't happen to guys either, but I've been with Doris, and we're walking along, and I watch her move her purse to the other side of her body, or make sure she'll make sure I'm between her and the street, and things like just minor things, but things that you don't really. I'm not as conscious of them as she is, and she lived a long time as a single lady. So I mean, she knows how all that goes. So here's, knowing Chris the way I do, so I'm going to ask this question: do you parent your children the same way or different? Between the two.
Oh, I parent them much differently now.
Yeah. Even as adults.
Well, but now they are adults, and so I don't have really that parenting role to play at this point of their life, right? I'm the grandparent now.
Yeah.
So I look to when they were in their adolescence, when they were young adults, how I spoke to them, what I felt like they needed direction in, where one might do, very well in a certain direction, but the other might struggle with it more. But I think that my end game was really the same with both of them, no matter how much I parented them a little bit differently. Consistency was important, right? You might parent them differently, but you got to be consistent in your messaging.
Yeah.
And so I think that when it comes to the messaging, it was very consistent, but how that message was delivered was different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Andy, you've got 3 different ones. So, how does that play out in your family?
Yeah, 3 very different. From oldest to youngest, and the boy in the middle, and yeah, I know I parented different for each one. My oldest daughter was a lot more independent. My youngest daughter needed a little more hand-holding. My son was just somewhere in the middle, and
literally,
literally in the middle. But I mean, it just, their personalities are different, and it's like everybody. Everybody has different things that motivates them and doesn't, and finding that for each one of them was part of the trick.
Yeah, I know that with ours, it's interesting because things that worked with Patrick, we just assumed Matthew was going to be just the same way, and those things didn't work at all with him. He's taking a totally different angle, and then a lot of times we both benefited. Both Doris and I were middle kids, so she had an older brother and sister. I had an older brother and sister, and then we each had younger siblings too. So I think we were well equipped, understanding that our parents were treated everybody equal but different, and it was that kind of thing, and seemed to, and we try to mimic this. They just seem to do the right things at the right time and give us the right message at the right time, and so hopefully that's. Our kids will pass that on as they have kids. We can only hope. So this is the final question. I need each of you guys to probably answer this and think about it. But and I'll start with you, Todd. Is what do you pray for most as a dad?
So having one child local who spends a lot of time with Liz and I at our home, we I do daddy daycare for her dog, so she stops and drops the dog on her way to work and picks her up. When she travels, we help with that. When we travel, she helps us. She's independent. She loves what she's doing. She's suffered with OCD for a number of years, and we didn't really figure out what it was until she was in high school. and I've celebrated her overcoming that and then relapsing with COVID and then overcoming it again. So I think for one, it's just to overcome things that are really out of her control.
Sure.
That and it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I mean, and she's dealing with it very well. And I'm proud of her for how she's done that. For Mackenzie, moving, graduating from A&M and moving to Seattle, Washington. I like going to College Station and going out with her friends, and the guys would take their hats off and pray when we were at Juet's. I mean, that's for her to go into a totally different environment, then I spent a lot of time praying for her, for her safety, for her sanity, for her to be able to engage in the middle of COVID in a town that was 2,000 miles from here. So they're very different humans. So my prayers for them are very different as well.
Yeah, that's insightful. That's right. Chris, how about you?
I think what I want for both of them is to have joy and fulfillment in their life.
Yep.
Really very, very simply. That it's simple, but it's also very broad in their work, in their relationships, in their family, in their spirituality. I think that that's one of the things that I think that we are created for is joy.
Yeah.
Right. That Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you. Plans for success and good, and so I think that that's always what I've hung my hat on. Is that I think that is the plan for us. And so that's what I pray for them. That's what I pray for my grandchildren, that they find things that they love doing, that they pursue their passions, that they don't get stuck in a rut of what, the world tells them they should be doing.
Trying to please
thinking.
Somebody else.
And that they just truly live into who they are created to be.
Sure. Andy, how about yourself?
So I think for me, most of the prayers that I have prayed is for godly men and women to be in their life and people, especially when it comes time to finding a spouse. That is, I think, my biggest prayer, and that they stay close to Christ.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I know with myself, it's kind of similar to that in that. That we pray that both of them are enjoy what they're doing, they do their best at it. That it's something that they as Doris has a phrase. She says, "I always want the best for you." That's what she talks to them. And particularly, a lot of times that comes into play when we're questioning a decision they made. But usually it's always the other times as well. But super. Well, guys, I can't thank you enough. This has been tremendous. It's been a great visit about fatherhood, and it's so appropriate, as we just celebrated Father's Day. So again, I want to thank our guests, Todd Patrick, Andy Juett, Chris Robinson, and certainly want to thank the production team here that helps us with Men in Progress. Another episode in the books, and we hope you were blessed in some way with our discussion. And, as we say pretty much every time, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. And that's really the whole purpose of this podcast, is to encourage men, to help us become better Christians, be better fathers, husbands, and better leaders, and just better men overall. I'm Dave Casey, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of the Men in Progress podcast is sponsored by Trietsch Memorial United Methodist Church, where our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. If you're in or near Flower Mound, Texas on any Sunday morning, we would love to welcome you to any of the Trietsch services. Or you can follow our services anytime on our Facebook page or at tmumc.org.